She was only 12. Yet her fingers moved over the piano keys with a confidence that belied her age. Every morning the sunlight would slip through the small window of her tiny bedroom and fall across the piano, turning the old wooden instrument into something almost magical. She loved the feel of the keys under her fingers, the way the notes could rise and fall and carry her into worlds she could not reach otherwise. Music was her escape, her comfort, and her joy. Even when life felt heavy, the piano could lift her up, even if only for a few moments. Her family was not wealthy. They lived in a modest apartment in the middle of the city, where the sounds of traffic, barking dogs, and the occasional honking horn competed with the music that flowed from her piano. Her mother worked long hours at a small cafe, and her father had a job that kept him away from home most of the day. Despite their busy lives, they had always encouraged her to play. They could see how much she loved it and knew it brought light into their small home. She had been playing the piano for several years, but most of her practice had been private. She played at home for her parents and for anyone who cared to listen. She had never been in a major competition before, but that was about to change. The local music school had announced a special contest for young musicians. Winners would have the chance to perform on a bigger stage, in front of an audience, and possibly catch the attention of someone who could help them pursue their dreams. She knew she had to try, even though the thought of performing in front of strangers made her stomach twist into knots. When she arrived at the school, she felt a mixture of excitement and fear. The hallway smelled of polished wood and old books. Students of all ages moved around carrying sheet music, instruments, and the nervous energy that always seemed to linger before a big event. She clutched her own sheet music tightly, feeling the crumpled edges against her palms. Her teacher walked beside her, offering quiet encouragement, reminding her to breathe and focus. The day of the competition began with a flurry of activity. Judges sat at a long table, glancing at programs and making notes. Parents whispered to each other, trying not to disturb the performers. The room buzzed with a mixture of tension and anticipation. She waited backstage, her hands shaking slightly as she listened to the other students play. Some of them were incredibly skilled, moving through pieces she could only dream of playing. Doubt crept into her mind. Was she really ready for this? Could she measure up? When her turn finally came, she was handed a sheet of music that made her heart stop. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. The song was complex, with fast passages that twisted and turned, jumps between octaves, and chords that seemed almost impossible to reach. Her eyes widened as she scanned the notes, trying to imagine how she would even begin. She had practiced many pieces before, but this was different. This was challenging on a level she had never faced. For a moment, panic took over. Her mind raced with thoughts of failure. What if she couldn't play it? What if everyone laughed or shook their heads in disappointment? The fear of letting herself down and disappointing her parents was almost unbearable. She felt a lump in her throat and her stomach churned, but then something inside her shifted. She remembered all the mornings she had spent at the piano, all the hours she had poured into her music, and the way she had felt when her fingers had finally hit the right notes in a difficult piece. That feeling had been pure joy. Maybe, just maybe, she could find that joy again in this impossible song. She took a deep breath, sitting at the piano with her back straight and her hands poised over the keys. The audience watched quietly, the room suddenly feeling very large and very still. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the silence settle around her. Then she opened her eyes and began to play. The first few notes were hesitant. Her fingers stumbled slightly, unsure of the speed and the jumps. But as she continued, something remarkable happened. Her fingers began to remember the lessons she had learned over the years. They found their own rhythm, almost as if her body knew what her mind was still struggling to grasp. She began to feel the music, not just the notes on the page. She could imagine the story behind the song, the emotions it carried, and that gave her strength. The room seemed to fade away as she played. The judges, the audience, the noise of the city outside, all of it disappeared. There was only the piano and the music and her own determination. Each passage she played became a little easier, and her confidence grew. She wasn't just playing the song, she was speaking through it, telling a story that only she could tell. Her hands moved faster and more confidently, and the impossible seemed just a little less impossible. By the time she reached the final notes, her heart was racing, her palms were sweaty, but a smile had crept across her face. She had done it. She had faced the impossible and played through it. The audience erupted into applause, and she felt a wave of relief and exhilaration wash over her. She didn't know yet how the judges would score her, but in that moment it didn't matter. She had proven something to herself. She had faced fear, taken a risk, and discovered that her love for music was stronger than any doubt or anxiety. Backstage, her teacher hugged her tightly, whispering words of pride and amazement. Her parents, tears in their eyes, held her close and told her how proud they were. She felt a mixture of exhaustion and triumph, the kind that comes only from pushing oneself to the limit and finding strength one didn't know was there. Even though this was only the beginning of the competition, she had already won in her own way. Later, as she walked home, the city around her felt different. The traffic noises seemed softer, the lights brighter. She felt lighter, as if the piano had given her wings. She thought about the impossible song and how she had almost been defeated by it. But in the end, it had pushed her to grow, to stretch her abilities, and to discover her own resilience. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more songs that would test her limits, but she also knew she could face them. That night, she returned to her small bedroom and sat at the piano again. She didn't have any sheet music, but she didn't need it. She played what she felt, letting her fingers move freely across the keys, exploring melodies that had never existed before. The city outside continued its noise. But inside there was music, there was joy, and there was a young girl who had learned that even the impossible could be faced with courage, practice, and heart. She played until her fingers ached and her eyes grew heavy. And as she finally rested, she felt a deep satisfaction. The impossible song was no longer something to fear. It was a challenge she had met, a mountain she had begun to climb, and she knew in the quiet of her room with the stars shining outside her window that this was only the start of her journey. The day after the competition, she woke up with her mind still full of music. The notes from the impossible song seemed to echo in her ears, even as she went about her morning routine. She had thought she had done well, but now that she was home, away from the applause and the nervous excitement, doubts began to creep in again. Did she really play it perfectly? Did she make mistakes she hadn't noticed? Would the judges see her as just another student who tried? Or would they recognize the effort and talent she had poured into the piece? Her teacher had encouraged her to keep practicing. The competition is not just about playing a piece, the teacher said. It's about growing as a musician. Each challenge you face teaches you something new. Don't be afraid of this one. Learn from it and you will become even stronger. She nodded, trying to absorb the words, but the feeling of pressure remained. The song was difficult. Every time she looked at it, she felt a mix of fear and fascination. It seemed almost alive, as if it were daring her to fail. For the next few days, she spent hours at the piano, her fingers flying across the keys, sometimes stumbling, sometimes gliding. She played slowly at first, section by section, breaking down the impossible parts into manageable pieces. She noticed details she had missed before, small shifts in rhythm, subtle changes in tone, and she began to understand the story the composer wanted to tell. Each practice session brought her closer to mastering the song, but it was exhausting. Her arms ached, her fingers grew stiff, and there were moments when she wanted to quit, to put the sheet music aside and pretend it didn't exist. Late one evening, her mother peeked into the room. She saw her daughter sitting at the piano, cheeks flushed, eyes bright with determination. She didn't say anything at first, just watched her play a few bars. The music was powerful, full of emotion and life. Finally, she said softly, "You have a gift. Don't let fear stop you." The words were simple, but they struck a chord deep inside her. She felt a renewed sense of purpose. If her mother believed in her, she could believe in herself too. Not everyone at school understood her dedication. Some classmates whispered behind her back, saying the song was too hard, that she would never be able to play it properly. That hurt, but it also fueled her determination. She reminded herself that no one else could play it the way she could. Music was personal, and she had her own way of expressing it. The whispers became background noise as she focused more intensely on her practice. Her teacher introduced new exercises to strengthen her technique. Scales, arpeggios, finger independence drills, all designed to make her hands more agile and her mind sharper. She complained at first, feeling tired and frustrated, but soon she saw the benefits. Notes that had once been awkward now felt natural. Passages that seemed impossible began to flow smoothly. Every small victory, every improvement made her more confident and more determined to conquer the song completely. One night she stayed up later than usual. The apartment was quiet, and the city outside seemed far away. She set a goal to play the song from beginning to end without stopping, even if it wasn't perfect. The first attempt was shaky. Her fingers stumbled over the tricky jumps. Her timing faltered and she felt the familiar sting of frustration. But she didn't stop. She tried again, slowly at first, then faster, correcting mistakes as she went. Her concentration was intense, her body tense with effort. But there was a sense of exhilaration in finally facing the parts she had feared most. As the hours passed, something remarkable happened. She started to feel the music in a new way. It was no longer just notes on a page. It was a story, a conversation, a journey she could guide with her hands. She played with expression, adding her own nuances, feeling the rise and fall of emotion in every phrase. The impossible song was starting to become hers. She could see the shape of the piece clearly in her mind and hear it in her heart. Her family noticed the change too. Her father came home late from work one night and listened from the doorway, silent and amazed. Her mother joined him, and together they watched their daughter play with focus and passion. They had always known she was talented, but this was different. She wasn't just practicing. She was performing, even in their small apartment. They whispered to each other, proud tears in their eyes. They realized that the hours of dedication, the struggles and the frustration, were shaping her into someone extraordinary. Despite the progress, there were still moments of doubt. Sometimes she would sit at the piano and feel stuck, unable to figure out a passage no matter how hard she tried. She would put her hands down, close her eyes, and breathe deeply. She reminded herself that frustration was part of the process. Every great musician had faced moments like this. The key was not to give up, to push through, and to trust that her hard work would pay off. Days turned into weeks, and each practice session became a battle she was determined to win. She began to notice small improvements that encouraged her. Her hands moved faster. Her memory for the music grew stronger, and her confidence increased. She even started to imagine herself performing in front of the audience again, not with fear, but with excitement. She pictured the applause, the smiles, and the feeling of pride that came from overcoming such a daunting challenge. One afternoon, her teacher suggested that she record herself playing the song. Listening to the recording was eye-opening. She could hear mistakes she had missed and areas that needed more attention. It was humbling, but it also gave her a clear roadmap for improvement. She took the recording as a challenge, determined to play better each time. Slowly, the mistakes disappeared, replaced by confident, flowing music. She was learning to master not only the notes, but the essence of the piece. Her friends at school began to notice changes in her attitude as well. She was more focused, more confident, and there was a quiet pride in her demeanor. Some of them asked about the song she was practicing, curious about the piece that had seemed impossible to play. She smiled and told them a little about it, careful not to boast. It felt good to share her journey, even in small ways, and she realized that her story could inspire others to face their own challenges. Through it all, she remained humble. She knew that even though she was making progress, the song still had moments that would test her. But now, instead of feeling fear, she felt curiosity and determination. She wanted to explore every corner of the music, to understand it fully and to play it with all the skill and emotion she could summon. The impossible song had become a puzzle, a challenge she was determined to solve. Late at night, after a long practice, she would sit quietly at her piano, her fingers resting on the keys, reflecting on what she had accomplished that day. She felt proud of herself, not just for playing the music, but for facing the frustration, the doubts, and the fear. Every small victory was a step forward, a testament to her persistence and her love for music. She began to notice changes in herself beyond the piano. She was more patient, more determined, and more willing to face challenges in other parts of her life. The impossible song had taught her that obstacles were not meant to stop her, but to help her grow. She was learning the power of perseverance, the value of practice, and the joy that came from discovering her own potential. The day of the competition was still ahead, and she knew that the judges would be watching closely. She didn't know what they would think, but that didn't matter as much as it had before. She had already learned something far more important. She could face the impossible, and she could rise to the challenge. The fear that had once held her back was slowly being replaced with a quiet, steady confidence. She knew that when the moment came, she would be ready to play not just with skill, but with heart. In those quiet moments when the city slept and the apartment was still, she played the impossible song over and over, discovering new details, refining her technique, and deepening her understanding. Each practice brought her closer to mastery, and each note played with care brought a sense of fulfillment that no applause could match. She had begun to understand that music was not just about winning competitions or impressing others. It was about expression, emotion, and the joy of creating something beautiful with her own hands. The impossible song no longer seemed impossible. It was a challenge she had chosen to face, and with every day of practice she was turning fear into skill, doubt into confidence, and frustration into triumph. She knew the road ahead would still be difficult, but she also knew that she was ready for it. She had discovered a strength within herself that she had never known before, and it was a strength that would carry her through the rest of the competition and beyond. She closed her eyes for a moment and let the final notes of the song linger in the air. A sense of calm washed over her. The journey was far from over, but she was no longer afraid. She had faced the impossible and taken the first steps toward mastering it, and with that she felt a quiet pride, a spark of hope, and a determination that burned brighter than ever before. The impossible song had become her teacher, her challenge, and her companion, and she was ready to face whatever came next. Weeks passed since she had first received the impossible song, and each day had been a battle between doubt and determination. Some days she woke up feeling nervous, unsure if she would ever play the piece correctly. Other days she awoke with a spark of excitement, eager to sit at the piano and tackle the sections that had once seemed insurmountable. She began to notice small improvements, subtle shifts in her fingers' agility, the way her hands could move across the keys more naturally, and the way her ears began to catch nuances in the music that she had missed before. Her teacher noticed these changes too. During lessons, the teacher encouraged her to explore different interpretations of the song, to try playing it with emotion, rather than focusing solely on hitting the right notes. This was a new challenge. Up until now, she had been concentrating almost entirely on technical mastery, making sure she could play each section without mistakes. Now she had to bring life into the music, and that required something she had never done before, letting herself feel the song, understanding the story it was telling, and making it her own. At first, this was frustrating. She tried playing a section with expression, but it felt forced, awkward, and unnatural. She became impatient with herself, sometimes slamming the keys in irritation or letting her hands drop into her lap. But slowly she began to discover a rhythm, a flow, a way to express the emotion of the song without losing control of the notes. She realized that the music could guide her feelings instead of being something she had to force herself to play perfectly. It was as if the song itself was teaching her how to become more confident, more expressive, and more connected to the piano. Late at night, she would practice quietly while the city slept. The apartment was still except for the faint hum of distant traffic. She would sit at the piano and imagine herself on a stage, performing in front of an audience, her fingers gliding across the keys. She played slowly, carefully, experimenting with phrasing and dynamics, learning how to bring the song to life. Sometimes she would pause, eyes closed, listening to the way the notes resonated in the room, feeling the vibrations travel through her fingers. These were the moments she loved most, the moments when the impossible song began to feel less like a challenge and more like a friend guiding her forward. Her parents were amazed at her progress. They often stopped by her room quietly, listening without interrupting. They had seen their daughter struggle and grow, and they could sense a change in her demeanor. She seemed more confident, more mature, and more patient. Her father, who rarely spoke about emotions, gave her a rare smile and a nod of approval, while her mother hugged her tightly and whispered words of pride. Their support, simple and consistent, helped her push through moments of doubt, and she began to understand the importance of having people who believed in her. Not everyone around her understood the effort she was putting in. Some classmates thought she spent too much time at the piano and teased her for being obsessive. But she didn't mind. She had learned to tune out the noise, to focus on her own growth rather than the opinions of others. The whispers and sideways glances became just another background noise, easily ignored as she concentrated on the music. She reminded herself that the impossible song was her own challenge, and no one else could walk her path or understand the dedication it required. Her teacher introduced more complex exercises to prepare her for the difficult sections of the song. They worked on hand coordination, timing, and finger strength. Some exercises were tedious, repetitive, and exhausting, and there were nights when she wanted to give up. Yet she remembered the feeling of accomplishment she had felt when she had first played part of the song correctly. That small spark kept her going. Every time her fingers moved more fluidly, every time a difficult passage became manageable, her confidence grew. The song was no longer just a test of skill. It was a journey of discovery, and she was learning more about herself with each note. One evening, while practicing a particularly tricky section, she stumbled over a series of fast notes and felt frustrated. She wanted to scream or throw the sheet music across the room. Instead, she took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and began again, slowly, carefully, until her fingers finally hit the right sequence without hesitation. The moment felt electric, a combination of relief, pride, and excitement. She realized that progress often came in small steps, and that patience was as important as talent. The Impossible song had taught her that resilience was as much a part of music as skill. She began to notice that her understanding of the song was deepening. She could hear the emotional shifts in the music, the rise and fall of tension, the delicate whispers of certain notes, and the powerful, commanding chords that demanded attention. She started to think about how a listener might feel while hearing her play, and she began to shape the music with that in mind. She experimented with tempo, softness, and intensity, learning how to communicate feelings through the piano. This was a new level of mastery, one that required more than just precise fingers. It required imagination, empathy, and intuition. Her confidence grew steadily, though she was careful not to let it turn into arrogance. She knew the song still had difficult passages, and she respected it for the challenge it presented. The song had become a partner in her growth, pushing her limits while teaching her patience and creativity. She realized that the real journey wasn't about impressing others or winning the competition. It was about discovering the potential within herself and learning how to express it fully. Occasionally, she would play for her parents or teacher, and they would watch with awe as she navigated the impossible passages with grace and precision. Their reactions were never exaggerated but always genuine, reinforcing her belief that she was on the right path. She began to understand that mastery was not just about playing every note correctly, but about communicating something deeper, something that could touch the hearts of those who listened. She felt a quiet pride in this realization, a sense that her music was becoming uniquely her own. There were still challenging nights, when her fingers felt stiff, her mind tired, and her confidence wavered. On those nights, she would remind herself that setbacks were part of growth. She would take breaks, walk around her room, and return to the piano with renewed energy. Slowly, the impossible sections began to feel more manageable, and the moments of doubt became less frequent. Each small victory, each successful practice session, reinforced her belief that she could truly master the song. Her friends began to notice changes as well. Some expressed curiosity, asking how she could dedicate so much time and energy to a single piece. She explained a little, careful not to boast, but she could see a spark of admiration in their eyes. Her journey inspired them in subtle ways, showing that dedication and hard work could yield results, even in the face of seemingly impossible challenges. She felt proud not only of her progress but also of the example she was setting. One night, after finishing a particularly long practice session, she sat back and reflected on how far she had come. She could play most of the song fluently now, with expression and confidence. The impossible no longer seemed insurmountable. It was a puzzle she had solved piece by piece. Her heart swelled with pride, not just for the technical skill she had developed, but for the resilience, patience, and determination that had carried her through the most difficult moments. The competition was drawing nearer, and she began to imagine herself on stage again. But this time, instead of feeling fear, she felt anticipation. She was ready to show not just her skill, but the depth of her understanding and the passion she felt for the music. The impossible song had transformed from a source of anxiety into a source of strength. She knew that when the moment came, she would be ready to play with both confidence and heart. As she prepared for the next round of practice, she felt a sense of excitement that was stronger than her nerves. The impossible song had challenged her in ways she could not have imagined, forcing her to confront her doubts, push her limits, and explore her own abilities. She had grown not only as a pianist but as a person, learning lessons that would carry her far beyond the piano keys. And she knew deep inside that the journey was far from over. There were still challenges ahead, still notes to master, and still emotions to explore, but she was ready for them. The impossible song had taught her that determination, patience, and love for the music could turn even the most daunting challenges into opportunities for growth, and she was prepared to embrace every moment of the journey. The day of the performance finally arrived, and she woke up with a mixture of excitement and nerves. Her stomach felt like it was full of butterflies, and her hands were clammy even before she touched the piano keys. She had prepared for this day for weeks, pouring every ounce of effort and passion into mastering the impossible song. Now it was time to show not just her skill, but the heart and emotion she had learned to bring into the music. The hall where the competition was held was grand and filled with anticipation. Rows of seats stretched out before the stage, where judges sat with their serious expressions, programs in hand. The air buzzed with quiet murmurs from parents, teachers, and fellow competitors. Lights shone down on the polished wooden stage, highlighting the piano in the center, waiting for her to begin. She took a deep breath, steadying her racing heart, reminding herself that she had come a long way and that she was ready. Backstage, other performers moved about, adjusting their instruments and reviewing their sheet music. Some looked calm and collected, others fidgeted nervously. She watched them for a moment, feeling a flicker of doubt. What if she made a mistake? What if the impossible song proved too much under the pressure of the stage? But then she remembered the countless hours she had spent practicing, the nights when she had refused to give up despite frustration, the small victories that had built her confidence. She reminded herself that fear was natural, but it should not control her. Her teacher placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Remember what we practiced," the teacher whispered. "Feel the music, let it guide you, and trust yourself." She nodded, taking one more deep breath, feeling the weight of expectation, but also the support of those who believed in her. She stepped forward onto the stage, the spotlight warming her skin, and sat at the piano. The audience grew silent, the stillness heavy with anticipation. She opened the sheet music in front of her and let her fingers hover over the keys. For a moment, the notes seemed intimidating, the fast passages and complex chords like a mountain she had to climb all over again. But she closed her eyes, recalling the late nights of practice, the small breakthroughs, and the feeling of overcoming each obstacle. Slowly, she placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The first notes were cautious, careful, as her fingers tested the familiar path. But as she continued, a sense of confidence began to grow. Her fingers remembered what her mind sometimes doubted. The music began to flow more naturally, each note connected to the next. The audience seemed to fade away, leaving only her, the piano, and the song. She felt the story of the music filling her, and for the first time she played not just the notes, but the emotion behind them. The difficult sections arrived, those passages that had once caused her the most anxiety. She felt her hands hesitate for a moment, the memory of past struggles pressing in. But she did not stop. She drew a deep breath and trusted the hours of practice that had prepared her for this moment. Her fingers moved with precision, hitting every note accurately, the complex rhythms falling into place. She could feel the music rising and falling beneath her hands, carrying her along with its energy and intensity. As she progressed through the song, her confidence deepened. She played with expression, shaping the dynamics and allowing the emotional peaks and valleys to resonate fully. She imagined the story behind the music, letting her own feelings guide her interpretation. The audience watched, rapt, sensing the depth of her connection to the piano. Even the judges, who had seen many performances, leaned forward slightly, captivated by the young musician who was transforming a difficult piece into a living, breathing expression of art. There were moments of tension, brief hesitations as her fingers approached the most challenging passages. But each time she recovered quickly, her concentration unwavering. She realized that the mistakes she had feared were no longer the end of the world. They were opportunities to demonstrate resilience, to show that she could continue gracefully despite obstacles. Her focus on expression, on feeling the music, allowed her to overcome technical challenges naturally, without panic or self-doubt. The middle section of the song required both speed and control. She played rapidly, yet each note was clear and precise. Her fingers danced across the keys, executing jumps and arpeggios that had once seemed impossible. She felt a rush of exhilaration, a mixture of fear and excitement that only came from performing at her best. The audience seemed to lean closer, their eyes fixed on her hands, sensing the mastery unfolding before them. As she approached the final section, she felt a surge of emotion. This was the climax, The part of the song where every skill, every hour of practice, and every ounce of determination mattered most. She played with intensity and passion, pouring herself into the music completely. The sound filled the hall, resonating through the wooden floors and high ceilings, enveloping everyone in its power. She no longer felt nervous or afraid. She felt alive, fully present in the moment and connected to something greater than herself. The final notes approached, slow and deliberate, requiring control and subtlety. She leaned into each chord, letting it linger, feeling the vibration in her fingers and in her chest. When she played the last note, she allowed it to fade naturally, the silence settling over the hall like a soft blanket. For a moment there was nothing but stillness, and then the audience erupted into applause. The sound was overwhelming, a wave of admiration and excitement that washed over her. She sat back, breathless, her hands trembling slightly, tears forming in her eyes from the mixture of relief, joy, and pride. The judges nodded and smiled, some exchanging impressed glances. Her performance had exceeded expectations, transforming an impossible song into a display of skill, emotion, and artistry. The applause continued, growing louder as the audience rose to their feet. She felt a warm glow of accomplishment, the culmination of weeks of effort, struggle, and growth. She had faced the challenge and risen to it, not just with technical skill but with heart and soul. Backstage, her teacher enveloped her in a hug, whispering words of praise and pride. Her parents were beaming, their eyes shining with tears. She felt the love and support of everyone who had encouraged her along the way. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel fully proud, acknowledging the courage, determination, and passion that had carried her to this moment. As she left the stage, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The impossible song had seemed daunting at first, something beyond her abilities. Yet through persistence, practice, and belief in herself, she had transformed it into a triumph. She had discovered that fear could be faced, that challenges could be overcome, and that music was not just about notes, but about expressing the deepest parts of herself. That night, back at home, she sat quietly at her piano. The room was dark except for the soft glow of the lamp, and the city outside hummed gently in the distance. She played the impossible song once more, not for an audience, not for judges, but for herself. Each note carried the memory of her journey, the sweat and effort, the triumphs and struggles. She played with freedom and joy, letting the music flow naturally, knowing that she had grown not just as a pianist, but as a person. The applause and recognition were wonderful, but what mattered most was the understanding she had gained, that determination, patience, and love for the music could turn even the most impossible challenges into opportunities for growth and expression. She realized that this was only the beginning of her journey. There would be more songs, more challenges, and more opportunities to explore the depths of her talent. And she was ready, filled with the confidence, skill, and heart to face them all. The impossible song had been played, and the applause still echoed in her mind. Yet even as the hall slowly emptied, she knew that the real challenge was not over. The judges would confer, the results would be announced, and she would have to wait. Waiting was always the hardest part, especially when every second felt stretched into eternity. She sat backstage, fingers tapping unconsciously on the piano keys, replaying the performance in her mind. Had she truly expressed everything she wanted? Had she communicated the depth of emotion she felt when playing the song? Her teacher sat beside her, calm and reassuring. "No matter what happens, you gave it your all," the teacher said softly. "You faced an impossible challenge and rose above it. That is what matters most." She nodded, but she couldn't help feeling a flutter of anxiety. All the preparation, all the practice, all the moments of doubt and breakthrough had led to this point. And now the world was waiting to judge her. The audience, the judges, even her peers, they would see her, and she had to hope that they understood what she had given. The other performers gathered in the waiting area, exchanging nervous smiles and quiet conversation. Some were clearly disappointed by their own performances. Others seemed hopeful and confident. She listened politely, but her mind remained focused on the impossible song, replaying every moment, every note, every expression she had tried to convey. The memory of the performance was vivid, every detail etched into her mind. And with it came a quiet sense of pride. She had faced the impossible and she had succeeded in her own way. Finally, the results were announced. The hall filled with anticipation as the judges took their seats on the stage. Names were called, accolades given, and the audience listened intently. Her heart pounded in her chest as she waited for her moment. She felt a mix of excitement and fear, wondering how her performance had been received. She had played the song with everything she had, but would it be enough? When her name was called, she felt a rush of relief and joy. She had been recognized for her performance, praised not just for technical skill, but for the emotion and expression she had brought to the music. The judges described her playing as confident, expressive, and mature beyond her years. They noted the care she had taken with every note, the attention to dynamics and phrasing, and the way she had captured the essence of the piece. Their words were more than validation. They were acknowledgement of her journey, of the struggles she had overcome and the growth she had achieved. The audience erupted into applause again, and she felt the warmth of recognition wash over her. She had not only faced the impossible song, but she had made it her own. The realization brought tears to her eyes, not of sadness, but of fulfillment and triumph. She had proven something to herself, something that could not be measured by scores or trophies. That dedication, courage, and love for music could transform fear into accomplishment. After the awards were given, she returned to the dressing room, still buzzing with emotion. Her teacher embraced her warmly, whispering words of pride and admiration. Her parents stood nearby, smiling and holding back tears. She realized in that moment how much support had carried her through the journey. The countless hours of practice, the moments of doubt, and the small victories had all led to this point. She understood that she had not reached this achievement alone. The encouragement and belief of those around her had been as important as her own determination. That night, she returned home, the city lights twinkling outside her window. She sat at her piano once more, not out of obligation but out of sheer joy. She played the impossible song again, exploring nuances she had discovered only in performance. The music filled the room, echoing softly against the walls. It was familiar yet new, alive with emotion and life. She played not to impress anyone, not for recognition, but for the simple love of the music, for the way it spoke to her heart. As her fingers danced across the keys, she reflected on the journey she had taken. The impossible song had begun as a source of fear and uncertainty, a challenge that seemed beyond her abilities. But through persistence, practice, and belief in herself, she had transformed it into a triumph. She had discovered not only her skill as a pianist, but her own strength, resilience, and capacity for expression. Every mistake, every hesitation, every small victory had been part of the process that led to this moment. The song had also taught her about patience and perseverance. There had been nights when progress seemed impossible, when her fingers stumbled and her confidence wavered. Yet she had continued, one note at a time, one section at a time, until she could play the song with both skill and heart. That patience, that willingness to face challenges despite fear, had carried her through the most difficult moments and had allowed her to grow not just as a musician, but as a person. She began to think about the future. The impossible song had been a major milestone, but it was not the end of her journey. There would be other challenges, other pieces that tested her limits, and other performances that required courage and dedication. But now she knew that she could face them. She had learned that fear was not something to be avoided, but something to be faced head-on, with determination, preparation, and heart. Her parents watched from the doorway as she played, their expressions soft and full of pride. They had seen their daughter grow in ways that went beyond music, learning resilience, patience, and the joy of pushing herself toward her goals. They did not interrupt or comment. They simply listened, allowing her to express herself freely, celebrating the journey and the growth they could see in her. Even after the audience and judges had praised her, she remained humble. She understood that mastery was a continuous journey, not a destination. Every performance was an opportunity to learn, every piece of music a new challenge, and every note a chance to express herself in a deeper, more meaningful way. The impossible song had shown her the heights she could reach, but she knew there was always more to explore. As the night wore on, she continued to play, losing herself in the music. The apartment was quiet, the world outside subdued, and in that space she felt free. She experimented with subtle changes in tempo, dynamics, and phrasing, discovering the many ways the song could be interpreted. She realized that music was not just about hitting the right notes, but about communicating emotion, telling a story, and connecting with those who listened. Each variation brought new insights and joy, reinforcing her love for the piano and the impossible song that had transformed her journey. She thought back to the first time she had seen the sheet music, the fear that had gripped her and the doubt that had lingered in her mind. The journey from that initial moment of uncertainty to the triumph she had experienced on stage was remarkable. She had grown in skill, confidence, and emotional depth. The impossible song had become more than just a challenge. It had become a teacher, a guide, and a symbol of her resilience and dedication. Her teacher reminded her gently that the applause and awards were wonderful, but the most important achievement was what she had learned about herself. She had faced fear, persevered through difficulty, and emerged stronger. That inner strength, once discovered, would carry her through all future challenges, both on and off the stage. She understood now that true growth came from effort, persistence, and the courage to keep moving forward even when the path seemed impossible. The impossible song had transformed her. It had taught her about determination, patience, and the joy of discovery. It had shown her that challenges were not barriers to success but opportunities to grow, to learn, and to explore the depths of her talent. She had faced the impossible, and in doing so she had uncovered the potential that had always existed within her. That potential was now awakened, ready to guide her toward new challenges, new music, and new triumphs. As she finally rested her hands, closing her eyes and listening to the lingering notes of the piano, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The journey had been long and sometimes difficult, but it had been worth every moment. The impossible song had become a part of her, a testament to her dedication, skill, and heart. And as she looked toward the future, she knew that she was ready for whatever challenges awaited, confident in her abilities, and inspired by the journey that had brought her this far. In the days following the competition, the excitement slowly settled into a calm sense of accomplishment. She returned to her normal routine, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. Even the simplest practice session was filled with a sense of purpose. The impossible song, once a source of fear, had become a reminder of how much she had grown. She could play it with ease now, each note a testament to her perseverance and determination. Her parents continued to support her, proud not only of her performance, but of the strength she had shown. They encouraged her to continue exploring new pieces, new challenges, and new opportunities. Their belief in her was unwavering, and she drew strength from it. The lessons she had learned went beyond music. They were about patience, resilience, and the importance of believing in oneself. Back at school, her classmates began to see her in a new light. Some were impressed by her achievement, while others seemed inspired to work harder at their own pursuits. She didn't seek attention, but she noticed the subtle changes in how people treated her. She realized that dedication and effort could influence others, and that her journey could inspire more than just her own growth. This understanding added a new layer of meaning to her music. With the impossible song mastered, she began to explore new pieces. Each new song brought its own challenges, but the confidence she had gained allowed her to approach them with excitement rather than fear. She experimented with different styles, tempos, and techniques, constantly learning and improving. Her love for music deepened, and she discovered that the process of learning itself could be as rewarding as performing. One evening, she received an invitation from a local music academy to perform at a special event. It was an opportunity to showcase her skills in front of a larger audience and to meet other young musicians. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness, but she also knew she was ready. The impossible song had taught her that challenges were meant to be faced, not avoided. She began preparing for the new performance, confident that her dedication and practice would carry her through. As she practiced, she reflected on her journey. The fear she had once felt when faced with the impossible song now seemed distant, almost surreal. She had learned to face uncertainty with courage, to embrace challenges with determination, and to find joy in the process of growth. Every note she played was a reminder of her perseverance, and every success was built on the lessons of past struggles. Her teacher continued to guide her, introducing new techniques and encouraging her to experiment with her own interpretations. They explored nuances in phrasing, dynamics, and expression, pushing her to think beyond technical skill and focus on the emotional impact of her music. These lessons helped her grow not only as a performer but as an artist, teaching her that music was about storytelling, connection, and communication. The day of the Academy performance arrived, and she felt a familiar rush of nerves. The hall was larger than before, with more people in the audience, but she approached the stage with a sense of confidence she had never felt previously. She took her place at the piano, fingers poised over the keys, and let the music guide her. This time she was not focused solely on the impossible song. She had prepared new pieces, each chosen to showcase her versatility and depth. As she played, she felt a profound connection to the music. The audience responded with applause and attentive listening, and she realized that performing was not just about impressing others. It was about sharing a part of herself, her emotions, and her experiences. Every piece she played told a story, and she reveled in the opportunity to communicate through the piano. The experience reinforced the lesson she had learned from the impossible song, that dedication, practice, and courage could transform fear into beauty. After the performance, several music instructors approached her, praising her skill and encouraging her to continue pursuing her passion. They offered advice, opportunities, and guidance, recognizing her potential and dedication. She felt a sense of pride and excitement, realizing that the journey she had started with the impossible song was opening doors she had never imagined. The validation was encouraging, but she remained humble, understanding that the true reward lay in the love of music and the joy of continuous learning. She continued to practice diligently, setting new goals and embracing each challenge with determination. She explored different genres, experimented with improvisation, and studied the works of renowned composers. The foundation built by the impossible song gave her the confidence to approach these new challenges with curiosity and resilience. She no longer feared difficult pieces. Instead, she welcomed them as opportunities to grow and express herself more fully. As time went on, her performances became more polished and expressive. She learned to manage nerves, connect with audiences, and convey the emotions behind each note. The impossible song remained a touchstone in her journey, a reminder of the hurdles she had overcome and the growth she had achieved. It symbolized not just technical mastery, but the courage to face challenges, the patience to practice diligently, and the joy of expressing oneself through music. Her family continued to be her greatest supporters. They celebrated her achievements quietly, sharing in her successes without overshadowing her growth. Their encouragement reinforced the lessons she had learned about perseverance, humility, and the importance of believing in herself. She understood that support combined with dedication could make even the most daunting challenges achievable. Beyond music, she noticed that the lessons from the impossible song influenced other areas of her life. She approached schoolwork with more patience, solved problems with creativity, and faced personal challenges with resilience. She had learned that effort, determination, and belief in oneself could overcome fear and uncertainty, whether on the piano or in everyday life. The growth she experienced through music became a foundation for her overall character and confidence. Over the months, she participated in more performances, each one an opportunity to share her love for music and to continue learning. She connected with other young musicians, exchanging ideas, techniques, and experiences. The community of musicians inspired her to continue exploring, to take risks, and to push the boundaries of her abilities. She discovered that music was not just an individual pursuit but a shared experience, capable of bringing people together and inspiring them. In quiet moments, she would sit at her piano, reflecting on her journey from the first encounter with the impossible song to the accomplished performances she gave now. She realized that the journey had been about more than just mastering a difficult piece. It had been about discovering herself, building resilience, and learning to express emotion and creativity through music. The impossible song had taught her lessons that extended far beyond the piano keys, shaping her into a confident, thoughtful, and dedicated young musician. She also began to mentor younger students, sharing her experiences and offering guidance. She remembered the support and encouragement she had received and wanted to provide the same for others. She taught them that challenges were not obstacles to fear, but opportunities to grow, and that persistence and passion could transform even the most difficult tasks into achievements. Mentoring reinforced her own understanding and allowed her to see how her journey could inspire and help others. Years passed, and she continued to grow as a musician. The impossible song remained a cherished memory, a symbol of her courage, growth, and perseverance. She approached every new piece with confidence and curiosity, remembering the lessons learned from her first major challenge. Each performance, each practice session, and each new opportunity reinforced the belief that dedication, patience, and love for her craft could transform the impossible into reality. Eventually, she began composing her own music, drawing on the experiences and lessons from her journey. She explored new styles, created original pieces, and shared them with her teachers, peers, and audience. Composing allowed her to express herself in new ways, and she found joy in shaping sounds into stories, emotions, and experiences. The foundation of skill, discipline, and emotional expression that the impossible song had provided guided her in this creative process. Through it all, she never forgot the moment she first faced the impossible song. The fear, the struggle, the dedication, and the triumph had shaped her in profound ways. It had taught her that challenges were not to be feared but embraced, that effort and persistence could overcome doubt, and that music could be a powerful medium for self-expression and connection. That journey remained a guiding light, reminding her that with courage, patience, and heart anything could be achieved. Sitting at her piano one quiet evening, she reflected on her journey. She felt gratitude for the song that had seemed impossible, for the teachers and family who had supported her, and for the personal growth she had achieved. She realized that her love for music was not just about performing or winning accolades. It was about expression, discovery, and the joy of creation. Every note she played carried the lessons she had learned and the experiences she had embraced. She smiled, fingers resting on the keys, feeling a sense of fulfillment that went beyond recognition or applause. The impossible song had started as a challenge, transformed into a teacher, and ultimately became a symbol of a